America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation.
And I'm Alfredo Ortiz, CEO of Job Creators Network.
And you can subscribe to the show at Salem Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts from. Alfredo, I am super excited because the House introduced their version of the Prove It Act, and it was introduced by Congressman Finstad and Caravio. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name correctly, but very excited because the Prove It Act was something that came from our American Small Business Prosperity Plan, which was introduced on the Senate side first by Senator Joni Ernst. So super excited about that. We talked to her last year and her team on the Small Business Committee. And really what it is helping small businesses that have just been crushed by overregulation and government overreach. It basically forces Congress and the agencies to do their jobs and make sure that they're not negatively impacting small businesses in a disproportionate way when they're writing all of these rules and regulations. It seems very common sense. The laws are already in the book, but it actually forces them to do their job. And if they don't, then the small businesses are automatically exempted from the new rule. I think it's fantastic.
I mean, it is a great piece of legislation, and I certainly hope it ultimately passes because it is something that our small business owners desperately need. As you know very well, that's one of the 8 points and 8 buckets that we put in our American Small Business Prosperity Plan that Newt Gingrich and I co-introduced. And so extremely important. Small businesses get beat up left and right when new regulations get introduced. They disproportionately get hit from a financial standpoint because they just many times don't have the revenue base to be able to offset the cost the way a large company does. And so it's something that if we can really help our small businesses on this one, this I actually think is a true game changer for our small businesses.
Yeah, and this one's hard to sort of help everyday ordinary Americans understand why this is important. Our small business owners understand because regulations aren't just costly in terms of being like a hidden tax for them, but they're also a time suck. I mean, most small business owners, Main Street small business owners, they're kind of the chief cook and bottle washer of their company. They open the door, they answer the phone, and they take the garbage out and close the door at night. And so they don't have floors of lawyers and accountants, in Washington and fighting for them there and looking for every little exemption that they can find to rules and things like that. And so small business owners they get hammered by these rules that, unfortunately our legislators they don't see the unintended consequences of, what they're trying to do. And maybe there's a good intention. I assume they have good intentions in it. But many times they just don't consider Main Street.
Yeah, well, Dodd-Frank for me is the best example of those unintended consequences, right? Which, was a piece of legislation introduced, during the financial crisis. And, what ended up happening is big banks just got bigger and the small banks kind of disappeared almost, or a lot of them did. Over 2,000 community banks went away. And as you know very well too, community banks are the heartbeat of our small businesses across the country. And so without community banks, there are no small businesses. So I take a little bit of a different perspective on this one, Elaine. I actually think they're not unintended consequences. I actually think they're very intentional consequences because small businesses in this country are the antithesis of what the left and the Democrats actually believe in. And I think they do whatever they can to eliminate these small businesses because, look, they can't control them. They can't get in bed with them, right? They can't corral them. They're very free-spirit, independent, loving individuals that love free enterprise, that love capitalism. So again, it's the antithesis of what the Democrats actually believe in. And so I think the more they can get rid of small businesses, frankly, the better it is for them and more in line with their agenda. Again, I'm maybe a skeptic now about these intentions that the Democrats have, especially when it comes to these small businesses.
I mean, I think that's why such, even our polls, our Job Creators Network Foundation poll shows that small businesses really favor, former President Trump over Biden's policies because he really was, he understood small business. I mean, I know he's not a small business, but he understood small business. And he made it, he had the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was his signature legislation. And of course, fantastic for the economy. It was like rocket fuel. But he really tackled regulations. And it was kind of the unspoken additive to the economic boom that we saw, because I think I've heard different numbers and maybe you know better, but I've heard for every one new regulation, he eliminated 4.
It actually, the numbers, that was, I think, their goal. I think it was actually for every one, they were going to try to eliminate 6 or 7. They eliminated 22 regulations for every new one introduced.
Okay.
At the end of the day.
So, I was way off.
Yeah, no, but I mean, look, I mean, it's but it's obviously the right direction. I mean, you want to be getting rid of these regulations because it only bogs down Americans and consumers and our small businesses, and so over-regulation is really burdensome for any business and any individual. So I'll never say that we don't need regulations because we obviously do. Right. It's the idea of over-regulation. That's the problem.
Well, we definitely have an issue at the federal level with the overreach from the agencies, right. And they are continuing to. It almost feels like legislation coming out of agencies, and that's not how it's supposed to be. Right. So I'm glad to see this legislation coming out. It's got a sister piece in the Senate, and I hope it gets taken up for the sake of our small businesses. Yeah. But we're going to talk to another free market person in just a few minutes, Governor Doug Ducey, former Governor Doug Ducey of Arizona. So I'm excited to talk to him. We've got a long friendship with him throughout his governorship. So he's coming up next.
That's exciting.
Governor Ducey was Arizona's 23rd governor. He was elected in 2014 and reelected in 2018. Governor Ducey applied his experience from a successful career in business to bring much needed change to Arizona government. And if I remember correctly, he had a sign above his door that read, "Arizona is open for business." I think I have a picture of that. From the many times I've been out to visit. But he's committed to investing as his time as governor, he was committed to investing in public education. He led a historic and bipartisan effort to invest $3.5 billion into K through 12 schools in his first year, injecting more dollars into Arizona's classrooms with a focus on teacher pay. The governor also successfully championed the passage of legislation to increase teacher pay by 20% by 2020. Governor Ducey cut regulations and simplified taxes to stimulate job creation and economic growth. Governor Ducey, welcome to Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone.
Great to be with you, Elaine. Good to see you and Alfredo again.
Absolutely. Governor, I was just looking at my calendar, thinking back, could it actually be 10 years that we've known each other? And boy, time does go by fast. But I will tell you, Arizona was blessed to have you as their governor for 2 terms. And you did so much for that state. And you've been such a good friend to Job Creators Network. So we thank you for that. And we're just excited to have you on our show today.
Well, it's great to see you again. Time does fly when you're having fun. And the last decade with Job Creators Network, we did a lot to transform Arizona's economy. And Elaine ticked off a number of accomplishments that we were able to get done. The governor gets an outsized amount of credit, but I hope people realize it's a team sport. And organizations like Job Creators Network and good advocates making the case in the public arena make the difference when you need to get the votes. And now Arizona is a shining example of what can be done in a short amount of time.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Now, we are going to talk a little bit in the show about your successor, though, and the different path that she has decided to take for the state, and why we need to keep fighting, and probably even harder than when you were in office, because she's trying to undo all the wonderful things that you have done and did do for that state. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But before we get into all of that, I want to talk just a little bit about your journey to where you got to governor, because you were born in Toledo, Ohio, and then you moved to Arizona. And then you created this wonderful company, Cold Stone Creamery, and then jumped after that into your governorship. But let's go back to the Cold Stone Creamery days. Like, how did that come about? Because obviously our audience are small business owners that have, or potential small business owners, and so many have ideas, but how did you take it from an idea to fruition?
Well, thanks for pointing that out, Alfredo. My career did start in the business world. I was trained at Procter & Gamble, but I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, so I looked for different ideas. I was able to find Cold Stone Creamery. I put up money for the first franchise, became 50-50 partners with the gentleman that had opened the first store, and we built 1,440 ice cream stores over the next 10 years. So that was the 10 years before I met you. I think the penance for selling ice cream is entering public life, because 50% of your popularity goes away immediately when you call out a party affiliation. But the ice cream business is a great business. I really saw this opportunity when I was at P&G on the Folgers brand, and saw what Starbucks was able to do in the largest traded commodity category in the world, which was coffee. The super premium category in ice cream was wide open, and God bless brands like Dairy Queen and Baskin Robbins, but they really weren't providing the personalization that Americans demanded at the time. And other super premium brands like Ben & Jerry's and Haagen-Dazs had fled to the grocery stores. So it was when, opportunity meets preparation. That's the definition of good luck. We had a great product. We had incredible franchisees. And I also think it was great training to run for governor. One, working with your franchise community is a lot like working with the legislature. They have equal say in what happens, and you have to be a good communicator, a coalition builder, to get things done and to move the brand forward. But also, if you've opened up a lemonade stand, or one of your kids have, you know what it takes to open up an ice cream store. And we were able to see in states like Arizona, we were able to open and thrive. But places like California and New York State and Illinois, we had to answer questions as to why is it so much more expensive? Why does it take so much more time? And our franchisees were entry-level entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. These were firefighters and public school teachers and people that were going into business with their family. So they needed these stores to open. Time truly was money. Oftentimes, they had taken their entire life savings, investing it in getting the store open, and we'd have a line around the block on the day of opening, and they start to pay themselves back $4 and $5 at a time, and you would have regulators there with the power of life and death over their financial future. And something I tried to do as governor is to make sure we protected public health and safety, but to allow economic freedom to ring and people to pursue their version of the American dream. And when we get this right, and I know you know that at Job Creators Network better than anyone, it overcomes so many problems and issues that government is not well equipped to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that's one of the things that we'll also talk about the work on education and also your efforts to, battle back regulations. I think one of the favorite sayings that I remember when I first met you is, government should move at the speed of business. And I always thought that was a favorite tagline of mine that I always use again and again. But really quickly, I just completely forgot that you were a brand guy at P&G. So now I remember why I like you so much, because I was a brand guy at Kraft managing the cheese business there. So from one brand manager to another brand manager, I can appreciate, some of the work that you've done. And I know that you were a big supporter also of one of our initiatives a couple years back, the Great Opportunity Project. And you will be happy to know that we continue to push that forward. And maybe even this year, where I'm going to try to see if we make an official name change of the GOP from the Grand Old Party to the Great Opportunity Party. So wish me luck on that bureaucratic challenge.
Well, I will wish you luck, and you certainly know marketing and communication. I didn't know that about your background, but for Elaine to point out open for business in Arizona and operating at the speed of business, those are two sayings that drove the press nuts. Right. I don't know why. They just didn't like them and felt
because it made sense.
Business people see that it does make sense, and that we can have a sense of urgency in government. I mean, I'm not one of these individuals that thinks we want to get rid of government. I mean, that's a country like Iraq that has no government. But we should have a government that functions and that works alongside us and not over us like it does in so many of our states. That's why I love the example of the states and pointing out different governors, because you really can, if you're a strong-willed chief executive, steer your state in a better position, or like we see in J.B. Pritzker in Illinois, in a much worse position. And the thing that to me is crazy is people like J.B. Pritzker and Gavin Newsom are doing this intentionally, and Americans are voting with their feet. They are fleeing New York State. They are fleeing Illinois. They're fleeing California. I said during my reelection that we've become Chicago's favorite suburb because Midwesterners would not move to the West Coast. But if they want blue sky and they want to enjoy Cubs spring training games, they come to Arizona, where we have that Midwestern work ethic. But we still have a Western vibe of innovation and what used to be enviable about California in our youth. But that now seems a long time ago.
Well, before I hand it over to Elaine, because otherwise I'll monopolize the entire conversation here, what I always appreciate about you, Governor, is you actually found the statement of the people, by the people, for the people, not only a pithy statement, but I think that truly was your guiding light. And again, congratulations on all the great work in Georgia. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Elaine to start the actual questions that we had for you. So I appreciate the time on this upfront piece.
Thanks, Alfredo, and thanks for quoting Abraham Lincoln, the founder of the GOP. And if we can bring some of that opportunity to what he put out there as a party that really stood on principle, we'll do very well. I'm also grateful for you giving me credit for what's happening in Georgia. I'm going to share some of that credit with Brian Kemp, but I will say that at least the RGA had some say in getting him reelected. But it's another great example as well of a state that's embraced opportunity. People are flocking to Georgia. And I don't know if Elaine wants to touch on this or not, but one thing I noticed as governor, even in red states like Arizona or Georgia or swing states that we can turn red with good candidates, oftentimes we're battling the big city mayor. What I went through with an adversary in Kate Gallego as the mayor of Phoenix during COVID, I know that Brian Kemp experienced also with the mayor of Atlanta. And I think it's something we're going to need to address as we undergird economic freedom in our country, and also make sure that these big cities and urban areas, along with rural communities, remain safe places to live that provide opportunity to all our citizens.
Governor Ducey, thanks again so much for joining us. It is great to be back with you. Again, Alfredo mentioned 10 years, and it kind of struck a chord with me. We've worked on tax cuts with you. We've done multiple bus tours through Arizona. We worked on licensing reciprocity with you, came out and celebrated you passing licensing reciprocity. And we also came out and worked with you on the Great Opportunity Project. And that was really to highlight all of the things that you had done in Arizona, particularly during COVID, when you were one of the conservative governors that were able to balance the health and safety of your residents with the health of your economy, which turned out to be a great strategy. And there's several governors that, Governor Kemp's another governor, Governor DeSantis, who were able to do that and navigate this, once in a lifetime black swan event, but come out of it, in a better position. One of the things that you also did was you also helped parents who wanted to get their kids back in school. So education, as I mentioned in your intros, very important. And I know we highlighted that back then, what you did during the COVID, but you implemented one of the most extensive universal school choice programs in the country when you were governor. Can you explain the program and the impact that you've seen with it?
Sure, Lane. And boy, those things that you ticked off were such great memories, and time flew by. And I'm honored that you chose Arizona for those bus tour and events. I think other governors around the country saw that and they followed the lead in lowering taxes and reducing regulations. But to me, as chief executive officer of the state and chief spokesperson and salesperson, I wanted to attract people to our state. I believe a state is either growing or it's declining, the same as a business or a brand is. And part of that equation was having a high quality functioning K-12 system. And every governor, their number one spending line, or how I would like to think of it as an investment line, is in K-12 education. If you add universities to this, it's over 50% of every state's budget. Yet American K-12 education is flatlining in terms of outcomes. And I think we should find this unacceptable. I find it unacceptable as a parent, as a father, and certainly as a governor. And I thought we could bring some free enterprise principles to this, something Milton Friedman talked about in Free to Choose, that any high school or adult who's interested can see for free on YouTube. And Friedman also said that in a crisis, people will look for ideas that are lying around. And the idea that we had were educational savings accounts, ESAs. And that's basically giving the taxpayer dollars back to the family and saying, you're in charge. What is the best education for your child, and where should your child go? Now, this isn't a new idea. We passed this idea in 2017, and an anomaly of our Constitution is with enough signatures, you can refer a law to the ballot. So ESAs were referred to the ballot, and the people rejected them. We lost 65 to 35. And I sat around the table with my team and said, we need to do a better job communicating this. I don't know that people understand it. The government unions were against it. Most people that we did have a conversation with in small group settings said that sounds like a good idea, and I imagine a lot of people could benefit from it. Well, the crisis that Friedman predicted that came was COVID-19. And COVID-19 opened people's eyes and their minds as to what was happening in K-12, what was wrong, and what could be better. And believe it or not, it was a lady named Janelle Wood. Janelle is the leader of the Black Mothers Forum. And she was no fan of Doug Ducey during the summer of 2020 when I called out the National Guard and they had an 8 p.m. curfew. But in one of our discussions, she said, I sure wish we could find something we could agree on, Governor, and something we could work together on. And Janelle Wood sat next to the First Lady, Angela Ducey, in my final State of the State when I said from the podium that 50 years ago, politicians stood in the schoolhouse door and wouldn't let minorities in. Today, union-backed politicians stand in the schoolhouse door and won't let minorities out. These kids are trapped in failing public schools, and it's time to set these families free. Janelle Wood, founder of the Black Mothers Forum, led the standing ovation, organized the African American pastors to help whip the votes. We passed that by one vote in each chamber. Now, one Democrat voted for this. And the ironic thing is that Janelle and all the African American pastors are registered Democrats. So this is a nonpartisan idea. Condoleezza Rice says this is the civil rights issue of our generation. And this is something that not only will reform K-12 education, I think it can renew our country because it brings communities together, not only to get kids in the school of their parents' choice today, but the 1,000 flowers that are going to bloom in the next decade because we've provided freedom and innovation to educational entrepreneurs and parents. So Arizona led on this. Now 9 states have followed. We're on the 1 yard line in Texas and Tennessee, and it reminds me of that old sports story of Roger Bannister, who was the first person on earth to break the 4-minute mile. That hadn't happened since the days of ancient Greece and the Olympics. But once Roger Bannister broke the record, within months, other people were breaking that record. So I think people were of a mindset that we were never going to be able to change or reform K-12. We were stuck with what we had. But people like me that could send their kids to Catholic school, well, we had a choice. People that are of higher means and they live in the right zip code and go to the better public K-12 schools, they have a choice. Well, if we truly believe in equality of opportunity in this country, every family should have a choice, and universal ESAs give that opportunity and choice to all of our families. So I encourage all of the governors across the country, both red and blue, to get this done. Just take the Arizona law, cross out Arizona, insert your state, and you'll have universal educational savings accounts for every family in your state. And it's really going to work wonders for all of our kids.
Amen to that. I mean, as you know, I obviously have Georgia on my mind, Governor, being that I am in Georgia and from Georgia. I was just on the phone with the governor's office talking about what we're calling EFAs, education freedom accounts. And I know Governor Lee, for example, Governor Huckabee, and Governor Reynolds, I think are shifting kind of to that EFA term. And but ESAs, EFAs, I mean, same idea, parental choice, parental empowerment, right? So critical. It's interesting, though, in Texas and Georgia, a lot of similarities in terms of the challenges that they're having, Governor. And I'm wondering if you kind of had the same issues, but the rural Republicans are the ones that are giving them the most grief in Texas and in Georgia. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, or what's the best way of addressing those legislators in rural areas to get them over the finish line on these?
Well, first, leave it to Brian Kemp, Bill Lee, and Kim Reynolds to take a good idea and make it even better. I like that EFA positioning. And I think part of this is helping people understand. We certainly battled this in Arizona as well. And I like to say it took all of 8 years to get this done. But this was an idea that animated my race in 2014. It's why I left the private sector and ran for office. I really believe this can be the biggest game changer at the state and national level for our country. I mean, our kids have to have a better education. They have to know their American civics and history. They have to have a foundation in math, reading, and science. They have to know how to analyze numbers, to properly communicate both verbally and the written word. And schools of choice also support character formation. And they're more often in alignment with the values that are home rather than adversarial to that. So I think for rural America, which is oftentimes more aligned with the right, it was getting in those rooms and saying, what concerns you about this idea? Mm-hmm. Here's the good news, Alfredo and Elaine. There are a lot of great public K-12 schools in America, and nobody wants them to go away. It's the schools that are substandard, or the schools that are failing. And oftentimes when a kid's trapped in a failing school, or in the age of the internet, somebody might have made a bad decision on social media and need a fresh start, or they're just not at the right place. I know I had 3 sons and they learned differently. So in America, we believe in that choice and those options. I mean, if somebody told you that they were going to go to Arizona State University or Boston College or the University of Notre Dame, you'd say, good for you. You wouldn't say, why are you going so far from home? Why are you going to a Catholic university, a private university versus a public university? You would want them to go to the right place, just as if they chose a trade school or wanted to be a plumber and open up their own business with electrical contractors and others and help build homes. I mean, this is part of what the pursuit of happiness is and what economic freedom can provide. So I really encourage governors to get in those rural areas, let people air all their concerns, because good schools don't go away with this. Good schools will continue to thrive. If anything, they'll have more demand, because people will be leaving the bad schools and they'll be standing in line to get to the good schools or opening up new schools. We've seen that in Arizona with 525 charter schools. If you take those 525 schools educating over 220,000 Arizona kids, over 20% of our available kids, that's the #1 state in the nation for performance in math, reading, and science. So these schools of choice work. Another objection that I think some of our rural friends have is oftentimes that school that's in that county is the top employer in the county.
Absolutely.
Well, you know what? That school's not going away. That's a school of affection. Many people are going to want to send their kids to that school, but there will be an option in that county as well. Oftentimes, sometimes not. Sometimes the school's so good there and so flexible that there's not. And then the other thing I've heard in states like Texas and Ohio, and I heard this in Arizona as well, is they're concerned about the football program. They don't want to lose kids to schools of choice in the football program. And of course, we all love Friday night lights, and high school football is important. But there's a way to do this legislatively where you can allow the kid to participate in athletics. But if an optional or alternative education is what they need to thrive beyond high school and college, that's available as well. So I think in many ways, it's just getting all the objections on the table and then addressing them so people know that their county and their school is not going to lose in this equation. If anything, they're going to be healthier. They're going to have more options. And when these kids are well educated, adjusted, and thriving coming out of high school, community college, and college, oftentimes it allows them to stay in that rural area and to create jobs at home rather than coming to the urban core. So it's a way to really respect the rural way of life as well. Another governor that you didn't mention, and we all know and think highly of, is Governor Doug Burgum. And this is the governor of North Dakota, who actually, I believe, was working for IBM or a technology company like that, and got an idea to found a software company. And rather than do it in Silicon Valley, San Francisco, Boston, or LA, he went back to North Dakota and hired North Dakotans to help build this company, and created thousands of jobs, a tremendous amount of prosperity. And I want to see that happening in all of our states, all of our rural counties. And this is something I think school choice can address and amplify and not hurt our rural areas. But you got to get in the room with these guys. You got to let them say what's on their mind and meet them where they are. And if there's issues I'm not bringing up and they're addressing, then we have to get the facts and help them understand. But overall, once people in Arizona understood this, they were enthusiastically for it. And I'll give you the difference. We got crushed 65-35 in 2017. We passed this post-COVID in 2022, and our opposition wasn't even able to get the signatures to get this on the ballot. So, and we reelected Republican majorities in both our House and our Senate. So it's obviously something, it's an idea whose time has come, not just in Arizona, but across our country. So I want to give that energy and positive momentum to our red state governors to get this done. If you have a majority in your House and Senate, you should be working on this right now. I don't think there should be any excuse for not getting this done unless you want to improve it like Brian Kemp, Bill Lee, and Kim Reynolds are, but get it passed. And then, there's other governors out there like Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, who is a Democrat, and he actually ran on school choice. Once he got in office and poked his head up to start talking about this, the teachers union, the government teachers union started, beating on him, and he stopped talking about it. I would encourage Josh Shapiro to have the courage of his convictions and know that these kids in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and other areas of the state need a fresh start, and ESAs can provide that for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, two quick things. I know that you had a great partner at the federal level, Secretary DeVos, who believed in this, and I think actually was out in Arizona several times trying to help you with that. And secondly, we have actually launched the Education Freedom Alliance, basically working with Steve Moore from the Committee to Unleash Prosperity, and Lisa Nelson with the ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council and Job Creators Network. We formed the Education Freedom Alliance to try to get 25 states by the end of 2025 to have these EFA accounts, school choice. And so we would love your support, not to put you on the spot, but we would love your support and help and guidance and leadership on helping make that happen, because I couldn't agree with you more. Being a son of someone who education made the total difference for me growing up in Chula Vista, to sitting here talking with you and other leaders across our country, education for me was the great difference. And it can be a huge difference for millions of other kids out there. And I think, to your point, these schools aren't going to go away, these public schools. I think it's just going to create competition to make them better. And I think we've seen that in Iowa and other states that follow your lead. That's exactly what's happening. And so, again, not to put you on the spot, but I will tell you, Governor, we would love to have your support and help on making this a reality through this Education Freedom Alliance that we have, that we've started.
Come on, Alfredo. I mean, you had me at hello. Of course, I'm very helpful and supportive of this. I'm very proud that Arizona led on this, but it wouldn't be a success if it was only in Arizona or it was only in 9 states. I think this belongs in all 50 states. Betsy DeVos has been a saint, but don't let her kind, gentle, polite demeanor fool you. She's somebody who has been working on this for decades before I came into office. And the other thing I want to say here is we should not make this a partisan issue. We should get into every room in the country, African American, Hispanic, urban, and rural, and make this case to parents. If it's about public education, then that's educating our public. And much of our public is not getting that. I mean, it's not the rich people that need our help here. Their kids are already getting a wonderful education. It's people that are trapped in these certain situations and these certain zip codes. And we as Americans believe in our core that you should not be defined by the place of your birth. So I agree with you in terms of, besides your own parents, the biggest difference maker is that education that's provided to you. And we can all name teachers and mentors we met along the way. And I think also whatever we can do to break down this better than scenario. Somehow in the 1980s, the mindset crept in that every kid should get on the same path, graduate high school, go to a 4-year university and get a degree. And we've seen tremendous student debt, people leaving school early and unfulfilled without a sense of purpose or direction. When I was in high school, there was a class called SHOP. And a lot of people found their purpose and their passion there. They turned it into a paycheck and oftentimes a small business. So whether the venue is the traditional four-year university, a community college, or that career and technical training, what we used to call shop, these are things we should be exploring with young people at age 12, 13, 14, and 15. So they're excited about what's next in their life and finding different gifts and skills and aptitudes that they have. And then all of a sudden they won't be coming home saying, I don't understand why we have to take this class. They'll understand what the application is for it. And that's not just a Republican idea. Certainly, it's not welcome in today's Democrat politics, but this is an American idea. And I want to also point to some things that are also available on YouTube, like the movie Waiting for Superman.
I love that one.
Yes.
I love it too. It's I saw it before I ran for public office, and I wanted to get involved because I thought these are such good ideas with such common sense. And I think the person that produced and narrated that movie is a pretty far left individual on the political scale.
In fact, it's the same person that did Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth.
So on education, he was overwhelmed by the facts and the opportunity. And Michael Bloomberg, and I think that first superintendent of public instruction in New York City, was a hardcore Democrat lawyer. But at that time, they were embracing this. Of course, we saw these are really good ideas. And the charter movement and the ESA movement got on board. And then all of a sudden, it was the government unions that cleaved these folks off. I think the Republicans today have the opportunity to be the parents' party. But You won't be the parents' party for long because the other side's going to say, we've got to change our thinking and get on board on this. We ought to quit arguing about education. Get the money to the parents. Let these innovations happen. Let our kids learn at grade and mastery level, and then we'll have a better society for it.
Yeah, you mentioned that movie Waiting for Superman. I remember seeing that and just being so moved by that. And my one thought was right after I saw that was, in this country, no child's future should be dependent on the luck of a lottery ball.
Right.
It was heartbreaking seeing that. It was such good movie making or documentary making because the mom whose child, when the popcorn ball came up, they knew their child was going to have a great education that supported everything they wanted for them. And the ones that were left behind, I mean, it would be an incredible sequel to see what happened, in this tale of two cities. But that shouldn't be the case in our country. Everyone should have an opportunity should they choose to pursue it. And there shouldn't be anything standing in their way. Certainly not the government.
Well, Governor Ducey, I'm going to switch gears on you because I'm also very curious to learn more about what you're doing now. You are leading an organization called the Citizens for Free Enterprise. Tell us what you're doing there.
Sure. Thanks for asking, Elaine. Citizens for Free Enterprise is going to educate and advocate on behalf of free enterprise. Folks like Job Creators Network should see us as a partner and an ally in this cause. I think it should concern all of us that if you held up a placard in a college classroom today that said socialism and capitalism, it would be about a 50-50 proposition. So we want to make sure that young people understand where our prosperity in this country comes from. If people want to find out more, they can go to citizensforfreeenterprise.com. We're going to be standing up field teams in states around the country. We're going to be not only educating and advocating, but we're going to be registering and activating voters. We're going to help to organize small businesses. We want people to participate. We want to see more involvement. In some ways, unfortunately, our politics have been captured by some extremes, and it's repelling young people. I understand why some young people are unplugging and pulling out and going to different places. But the first law that I passed in Arizona was the American Civics Act. I thought it was important that our kids understood at least as much as a newly legalized immigrant. Everybody that becomes an American citizen that came from somewhere else legally has to take a test. It's a 100-question test. If I gave it to you two, you'd get 100 on it or a 97. There are a few really tough questions on it. I had to commit all the answers to memory because the press was asking them everywhere that I went. I think 31 other states have passed that law since Arizona did. Jay Nixon, who was the Democrat governor of Missouri, was the co-chair. I was able to present it at the National Governors Association. This idea of our kids understanding that our economic system of free enterprise, free market, or capitalism, all three are acceptable answers on the citizenship test. And why and what differentiates us from big government socialism is so important. It will also allow them to make better choices at the ballot box, and they'll be freer in their pursuit of happiness and the American dream. And that's what Citizens for Free Enterprise is going to help do. It's going to partner with other people that are on the playing field here. I'll tell you the other side, the folks that want to stop job creation, innovation, and growth are well organized and they're well financed. And that's why I count my blessings that we have people like Elaine Parker and Alfredo Ortiz and Bernie Marcus and Job Creators Network, along with Citizens for Free Enterprise. And if people want to find out more and find out how to partner in this cause, please go to that website, citizensforfreeenterprise.com. And I appreciate you pointing that out, Elaine.
Well, you had me at hello, Governor. So obviously you can count on us, just like you have for the past 10 years, supporting that cause, because there's nothing more important, I believe, to bridging that racial and economic divide. As you know, I wrote a book on this last year, The Real Race Revolutionaries. And really, entrepreneurship is so critical to really bridge that racial and economic divide. And it's the true answer, I think, for success. It's not more government, it's less government. It's not more taxes, it's less taxes. And so anything you need from our perspective, please know that you can count on us for that support.
Will do, Alfredo, for sure. And I think we just have to continue to communicate and educate. One of my favorite quotes are, there are no lost causes because there are no gained causes. There's always going to be a battle in a free country for ideas. I believe our ideas properly presented are winners, and not 51-49 winners or 50+1 winners. I think they're 80-20, 90-10 winners. People want to work hard. They want to keep the fruits of their labor, and they want to feel safe in their home and their communities, and they want their kids to have good experiences when they go away for these educational opportunities. So let's just keep pressing, keep plugging, and keep finding more Americans who feel our way the same way we do, as well as holding people in elected office to account on moving these ideas forward.
And that website again is citizensforfreeenterprise.com. So everyone should go and check out that website. Well, Governor Ducey, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on Main Street Matters, America's Small Business Megaphone. And thank you all for taking the time to listen and watch us today. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network, and new episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. Please subscribe to the show at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcast from. And we'll be back soon.